The truth about Penelope is darker than the film. Penelope, the very symbol of loyalty and devotion, the perfect patient wife who waited 20 long years for her husband to come home, never wavering, never doubting. At least, that's the story you've always been told. But other, older versions of Penelope's tale circulated quietly in the ancient world, whispered in the margins of the myth, and they paint a picture of a far more complex, far more unsettling, and far darker figure than the faithful wife we think we know. Today, we uncover the real story of Penelope, the one that doesn't make it into the movies. Please like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. We're going to look at 3 very different faces of Penelope. 3 ways of seeing the same woman. The hero, the victim, and, most surprisingly of all, the suspect. That last one is a theory you've almost certainly never heard before, one that quietly turns the entire loyal wife legend completely on its head and forces you to reconsider everything. Keep an open mind. Let's start, though, with the version of Penelope that almost everyone agrees on. The brilliant one. First, let's give Penelope her full due, because her cleverness here is genuinely, breathtakingly brilliant. As the suitors crowd her home and relentlessly pressure her to remarry, she can't simply refuse them outright. She has no army, no protection, no husband present to defend her. She's a woman alone against dozens of powerful men. So instead of force, she uses her mind. She devises an ingenious ruse. She announces to them all that she cannot possibly remarry until she has finished weaving a proper funeral shroud for Laertes, her aging father-in-law, a sacred family duty that no honorable man could rush or deny her. The suitors, bound by custom, have to accept this. So every single day, in full and open view, she sits at her great loom and weaves the shroud, thread by thread. But every single night, alone in secret, she quietly unravels every bit of the work she did that day. The shroud, therefore, is never ever finished. And through this one simple, patient, endlessly repeated trick, she successfully holds off a house full of aggressive suitors for 3 entire years. Now notice what this really is at its core. It is survival through pure intelligence, precisely the same kind of cunning her husband Odysseus used with his wooden horse at Troy. She is not a passive woman weeping helplessly by a window, waiting to be rescued. She is a strategist, every bit her husband's equal in cleverness, and in a way she was fighting her own long war at home while he fought his abroad. But here is where it gets dark. Some ancient sources, and various later writers who retold the myth across the centuries, tell strikingly different versions of Penelope's story, versions that never make it into the polished, familiar tale. In one, she does not remain faithful at all. She gives in to one of the suitors during those long, lonely years. In another, even more scandalous version, she yields to all of them and is named as the mother of the wild god Pan, a child who could not possibly have been Odysseus's. Now, to be clear, these versions directly contradict the main familiar narrative, and they're far from the accepted account most people know, but their very existence matters, and it matters a great deal. Because it means that even the ancient world itself wasn't entirely certain of Penelope's perfect, unbroken loyalty. Some storytellers, 3,000 years ago, standing much closer to the source than we do, already quietly doubted her. And it raises a genuinely uncomfortable question worth sitting with for a moment. To expect a woman to remain in flawless, unwavering fidelity for 20 long years, alone, besieged, with no idea if her husband was even alive, was that ever a realistic expectation? Or was it always a kind of male fantasy projected onto her by the men who told and retold her story? Now think back to the famous homecoming. When Odysseus finally returns, in disguise, Penelope does not immediately recognize him, or, at least, she appears not to. And she's the one who devises that famous test of the marriage bed, the secret only her true husband could know. Most people read this simply and sweetly, She just wanted to be certain it was really him before opening her heart. But there's a subtler, sharper reading hiding underneath. What if Penelope was buying herself time? What if she too, exactly like Odysseus, was a performer, carefully concealing what she truly knew and truly felt behind a mask of caution? Consider the possibility. Two master manipulators, husband and wife, each testing the other, each refusing to show their hand first, circling one another after 20 years apart. Seen that way, their reunion isn't purely romantic and tearful at all. It's a cold, brilliant, high-stakes duel of two equal minds, each one testing the other before daring to trust. And it's a far more interesting, far more unsettling story than the simple, loyal reunion we're usually handed. But here's the darkest truth of all, and it has nothing whatsoever to do with whether she stayed faithful. Penelope's story was never truly her own. Across 3,000 years of retelling, she was always framed as something in relation to Odysseus, a prize to be won at the end of his journey, a test he had to pass, a shining symbol of the home he was fighting so hard to return to. In the telling, she exists for him, and her own 20 years, her genuine grinding fear, her crushing loneliness, the immense burden of raising their son Telemachus entirely alone, the daily struggle to survive inside a palace packed with dozens of hostile, scheming men who openly wanted her husband's throne and her hand in marriage, all of that is almost never told. We simply skip past it to get to the reunion. Think about what that means. The woman held an entire kingdom together, alone, for 2 decades, and her story is a footnote. So the real darkness surrounding Penelope isn't the possibility that she was unfaithful or wicked or secretly scheming. The real darkness is that her story, her struggle, her 20-year war was quietly stolen from her and handed to her husband to complete his. So who, in the end, is Penelope? A brilliant hero, a forgotten victim, or a secret the myth never fully told us? Perhaps she's all three at once. But one thing is certain, she is so much more than the flat, faithful wife label history pinned on her. And here's a thought to sit with. Maybe the true survivor of the Odyssey wasn't Odysseus at all. Maybe it was Penelope, who fought her own quiet 20-year war on a battlefield of her own, entirely alone, and won. So, be honest with me. Do you think she truly stayed faithful all those years? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. And if you're wondering what happened after Odysseus finally returned, the next video is waiting. Subscribe.